Ladies and gentlemen, when we think about epic battles in Japanese anime, we often imagine legendary warriors clashing under stormy skies, ideals colliding with steel, and history being rewritten through blood and sacrifice. Vinland Saga delivers exactly that, but with a haunting twist. The fall of England in Vinland Saga is not just a tale of Vikings versus Saxons. It is the story of a world collapsing under the weight of ambition, fear, and endless war. It is history told like an anime tragedy, where no side truly wins. England before the Viking invasion is not shown as a proud, unbreakable empire, but as a land quietly bleeding from wounds that never fully healed. In Vinland Saga's anime-style storytelling, England feels like a kingdom standing on the edge of a cliff, unaware that one final step will send it falling. This is what makes the fall of England so tragic and so powerful. It does not begin with the arrival of Vikings, but long before their ships ever touch the shore. The Saxon world is built on tradition, faith, and memory. Churches stand tall, kings rule by lineage, and people believe that order itself is sacred. In many Japanese anime, such societies are often portrayed as calm on the surface but fragile underneath, and England fits this perfectly. The land is peaceful only because it is tired. Its people have seen too much war already. They farm, pray, and obey not because they are strong, but because they desperately want stability to last just a little longer. Politically, England is fractured. Power is divided among kings, nobles, and religious authorities, each pulling in different directions. Unity exists more as an idea than a reality. In anime terms, this is a kingdom without a clear protagonist, a nation lacking a single will strong enough to protect it. While the Saxons still carry pride, that pride is rooted in the past. They remember who they were, not who they are becoming. This disconnect weakens them more than any sword ever could. Militarily, England appears organized, but that organization is hollow. Soldiers fight out of duty, not hunger. They defend borders because it is expected, not because they believe conquest is necessary. In Vinland Saga, this contrast is crucial. The Saxons fight to preserve what they have, while the Vikings fight to take what they lack. In anime storytelling, characters who fight only to maintain the status quo often struggle against those driven by desperation and ambition. There is also a deep spiritual exhaustion within England. Christianity teaches patience, forgiveness, and faith in divine justice. While these values give people hope, they also encourage passivity in a world that rewards aggression. Many Saxons believe that suffering has meaning, that God will protect them if they remain righteous. This belief mirrors Prince Canute's early mindset and reflects a broader theme in Vinland Saga: faith without power cannot stop violence. In anime, belief systems often collapse when faced with brutal reality, and England's faith is about to face its harshest test. Culturally, England is slow to change. Traditions are honored, laws are respected, and hierarchy is accepted. This stability once made the kingdom strong, but now it makes it rigid. In anime symbolism, rigidity is often a sign of impending downfall. While England clings to structure, the world around it evolves. The Vikings do not respect borders, churches, or crowns. They respect only strength. England's refusal, or inability, to adapt leaves it vulnerable. The people themselves are not cowards. Farmers, villagers, and soldiers all show courage in their own ways. But courage without direction is easily crushed. There is no shared vision of the future, only a desire to survive the present. This emotional atmosphere gives England a tragic aura. It feels like a character in an anime who knows something terrible is coming but lacks the strength to change fate. Vinland Saga presents England as a land weighed down by memory. It remembers peace, order, and divine protection, but those memories no longer match reality. The Saxons believe history will protect them because it always has. This belief blinds them to the changing nature of the world. In anime narratives, characters who rely too heavily on past glory often fall when confronted with a new era. England is exactly that, a kingdom living in yesterday while tomorrow approaches with axes and fire. This is why the fall of England feels inevitable rather than sudden. The Vikings are not the cause of its weakness, they are the consequence. They arrive not as destroyers of a strong nation, but as predators sensing vulnerability. Vinland Saga uses England to show that collapse does not begin with invasion, it begins with stagnation, division, and exhaustion. By the time the storm truly arrives, England is already standing in the rain, armor rusted, spirit worn thin. Its fall is not just the loss of land, but the end of an era. In anime terms, this is the calm before the final arc, the moment when the audience realizes that the world they knew cannot survive what comes next. England's tragedy lies in this truth. It was not defeated because it lacked goodness or courage, but because it lived in a world that no longer rewarded either. When the Vikings enter the story of England in Vinland Saga, they do not arrive like typical anime villains announcing destruction with dramatic speeches. They arrive like a force of nature, silent at first, distant on the horizon, and then suddenly overwhelming. Their presence feels less like an invasion and more like an awakening of chaos that the Saxon world is completely unprepared for. In animated storytelling terms, the Vikings are not just antagonists, they are the embodiment of a new era colliding with an old one. The Viking mindset is fundamentally different from that of the Saxons. Where England is rooted in land, faith, and tradition, the Vikings are shaped by movement, hunger, and survival. They do not see borders as sacred or kingdoms as permanent. The sea is their home, and war is simply another form of travel. In Japanese anime, characters driven by pure survival often feel more dangerous than those driven by ideology, because they have nothing to lose. The Vikings fight not to protect what they have, but to take what they need, and that desperation gives them terrifying momentum. Unlike the Saxon soldiers, Viking warriors are raised in violence from childhood. Battle is not a duty imposed on them, it is a way of life they accept without hesitation. This creates a sharp contrast that Vinland Saga emphasizes visually and emotionally. Viking warriors charge forward with raw aggression, laughing, shouting, and embracing death as a possibility rather than fearing it. Against this, Saxon soldiers feel restrained, cautious, and hesitant. In anime terms, it is the clash between characters who fear death and characters who have already made peace with it, and the latter almost always dominate. The Vikings also bring psychological warfare with them. Their reputation travels faster than their ships. Villages hear stories of raids, burned churches, and slaughtered soldiers long before the first axe is raised. This fear weakens England before any real battle begins. In many anime, fear is shown as a weapon more powerful than strength, and Vinland Saga uses this idea perfectly. By the time the Vikings attack, England is already shaken, its confidence eroded by terror and uncertainty. What makes the Vikings especially dangerous is their adaptability. They do not rely on rigid structures or fixed strategies. They change tactics based on opportunity, terrain, and weakness. If a wall is strong, they find another path. If a king resists, they turn his people against him. This flexibility stands in stark contrast to England's rigid systems. In anime symbolism, adaptability often represents evolution, while rigidity represents extinction. The Vikings evolve with every raid, while England remains locked in tradition. The Viking leaders, particularly figures like Askeladd, understand that war is not just fought with swords. It is fought with timing, deception, and psychological control. They exploit England's divisions, manipulate alliances, and strike when morale is lowest. This strategic intelligence elevates the Vikings beyond simple raiders and turns them into conquerors. In anime storytelling, the most compelling antagonists are those who understand the system they are breaking, and the Vikings understand England better than England understands itself. Culturally, the Vikings also represent a rejection of moral comfort. They do not justify violence through divine will or righteous cause. They accept it as part of life. This brutal honesty makes them feel more real and more threatening. While England debates morality and faith, the Vikings act. In Vinland Saga, this difference highlights a harsh truth often explored in mature anime: hesitation in a violent world is a death sentence. The arrival of the Vikings forces every character and every nation to confront reality. England can no longer pretend that peace is guaranteed by prayer or tradition. The world has changed, and the Vikings are the proof. Their ships cutting through the sea feel like a visual metaphor for fate itself, unstoppable, indifferent, and relentless. In anime terms, this is the moment when the status quo shatters and the true conflict begins. For the Saxons, the Vikings are not just enemies, they are a mirror reflecting everything England lacks. Hunger versus comfort, adaptation versus tradition, action versus belief. This reflection is deeply uncomfortable, and that discomfort accelerates England's collapse. The Vikings do not destroy England alone, England collapses because it cannot become what the world now demands. Vinland Saga portrays the Vikings not as heroes or monsters, but as agents of change. They are brutal, ruthless, and terrifying, but they are also honest about the world they live in. In anime storytelling, such characters often serve as catalysts rather than villains, forcing others to evolve or fall behind. England, tragically, cannot evolve fast enough. By the time Viking boots touch English soil, the outcome already feels decided. Not because the Saxons lack courage, but because they are fighting a war from the past against enemies who belong to the future. The Vikings represent that future, violent, chaotic, and unforgiving. And in that clash, England's fall becomes not just a historical event, but an animated tragedy of a world that could not keep up with the storm that came for it. England in Vinland Saga does not fall in a single dramatic battle or one final heroic stand. Its collapse is slow, painful, and deeply symbolic, like a kingdom bleeding out while still pretending it can survive. From an anime storytelling perspective, this makes England's downfall even more tragic. It is not defeated because it is weak, but because it is fractured, divided, and trapped within its own systems. The Vikings merely expose wounds that already exist. At the heart of England's weakness is internal division. Power struggles between nobles, kings, and regional leaders leave the nation disorganized and vulnerable. While leaders argue over titles and loyalty, the Vikings move with purpose. In anime, this is a classic theme. When a group cannot unite under a shared goal, even the strongest walls crumble. England's leaders are too focused on preserving their own authority to recognize the larger threat approaching them. Religion, which should serve as a source of unity, instead becomes a limitation. Faith offers comfort, but it also creates hesitation. Many Saxon leaders believe divine protection will save them, causing delays in action and resistance. Vinland Saga portrays this not as mockery, but as tragedy. In a brutal world, belief without preparation becomes a weakness. Anime often explores this conflict between idealism and reality, and England stands firmly on the side of ideals that the battlefield does not respect. The military structure of England further highlights its vulnerability. Soldiers are bound by hierarchy, rules, and rigid formations. These systems work in controlled environments but collapse under unpredictable pressure. Viking attacks are fast, chaotic, and ruthless, shattering traditional defenses before they can adapt. In anime symbolism, England represents an old fighting style, honorable but outdated, while the Vikings embody a raw, evolving force that refuses to play by the rules. Another critical flaw is England's emotional exhaustion. Years of political tension, fear of invasion, and social inequality have drained the spirit of its people. When the Vikings arrive, many citizens are already tired of suffering. This emotional fatigue weakens resistance from within. In anime narratives, a broken spirit often falls faster than a broken body. England's people no longer believe in victory, they only hope to survive. Vinland Saga uses subtle visual storytelling to emphasize this decay. Darkened skies, silent villages, and worn-out faces reflect a nation that has lost its confidence. These details matter because anime thrives on atmosphere. England feels heavy, slow, and burdened, while the Vikings feel sharp, fast, and alive. This contrast reinforces the idea that England is already fading before the final blow is struck. Leadership also plays a crucial role in England's downfall. Kings and commanders struggle to inspire their people because they themselves are unsure. Fear spreads from the top down. In anime, strong leaders ignite hope, while weak leaders multiply despair. England's leaders speak of duty and faith, but their actions reveal doubt, and soldiers sense it immediately. Once trust in leadership breaks, collapse becomes inevitable. Perhaps the most painful aspect of England's fall is that it could have been prevented. The nation had resources, manpower, and strategic advantages, but lacked unity and adaptability. Vinland Saga presents this as a warning rather than a judgment. The anime suggests that civilizations do not fall because of enemies alone, they fall because they fail to change when the world demands it. England's collapse is not portrayed as glorious or dramatic. It is quiet, heavy, and suffocating. This realism sets Vinland Saga apart from typical war anime. There is no triumphant music, no heroic last stand, only the slow realization that an era has ended. The Saxons are not defeated by superior strength alone, but by their inability to escape their own limitations. England's fall feels less like a loss and more like an ending chapter written long before the Vikings arrived. The invasion is simply the final sentence. Vinland Saga uses this moment to remind viewers that history, like anime, is shaped not just by battles, but by choices, fear, and the refusal to evolve. The fall of England in Vinland Saga also represents the collapse of an idea, the belief that tradition alone can protect a nation in a changing world. This fourth dimension of England's downfall is not about swords or ships, but about mindset. From an anime, storytelling perspective, this makes England's defeat deeply philosophical. It is the loss of an identity that refuses to transform, even when survival demands it. England clings tightly to its past. Its customs, codes of honor, and social structures are treated as sacred and unchangeable. While these traditions once gave the kingdom strength and stability, they now act like chains. Vinland Saga presents this as a tragic paradox. The very values that built England are the same ones that prevent it from adapting. In anime, this theme appears often: the old master who refuses to evolve, the proud warrior who cannot accept a new way. England becomes that character on a national scale. The Vikings, in contrast, represent flexibility and brutal realism. They adapt their tactics based on the battlefield, the enemy, and the moment. There is no rigid doctrine they must follow, no moral illusion that shields them from harsh truths. This difference in mindset becomes one of the most decisive factors in England's collapse. Anime frequently emphasizes that survival belongs to those who can change, and Vinland Saga applies this lesson not to an individual hero, but to an entire civilization. Another key element is England's fear of moral compromise. Saxon leaders hesitate to use tactics they consider dishonorable, even when those tactics might save lives. Their reluctance is portrayed with empathy, not ridicule. Vinland Saga understands that abandoning one's values is terrifying. However, the anime also asks a difficult question: what happens when moral purity leads to destruction? England chooses to protect its ideals, even at the cost of its future. This internal conflict creates paralysis. Leaders overthink, councils debate endlessly, and decisions arrive too late. In anime terms, this is the moment when hesitation becomes fatal. While England debates what is right, the Vikings act. The battlefield does not reward reflection, it rewards decisiveness. Vinland Saga repeatedly shows that hesitation, no matter how noble, can be as deadly as incompetence. The people of England also feel trapped by this mindset. Farmers, villagers, and common soldiers are bound by loyalty to systems that no longer protect them. They obey out of habit, not belief. In anime, when characters lose faith in the world they live in, collapse soon follows. England's people sense that the old promises are empty, yet they lack the power to change anything. This silent despair spreads like a shadow across the land. Visually and emotionally, Vinland Saga reinforces this theme through contrast. England is shown as heavy and static: stone castles, thick armor, slow movements. The Vikings are fluid: wooden ships, swift strikes, constant motion. These visuals are not accidental. Anime uses imagery to communicate philosophy, and here it tells us that rigidity cannot survive in a world driven by chaos and speed. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of this keynote is that England's fall feels inevitable, not because the Vikings are unstoppable, but because England refuses to become something new. Vinland Saga does not celebrate this downfall, it mourns it. The anime treats England like a proud warrior who stands tall even as the ground collapses beneath their feet. England's defeat is not a lesson about strength or weakness, but about evolution. Vinland Saga quietly warns that clinging too tightly to the past can destroy the future. Through England's fall, the anime Delavies won. In the end, the fall of England in Vinland Saga is not just a historical event or a clash of Vikings and Saxons, it is a deeply emotional anime tragedy about power, belief, and the cost of refusing to change. Through brutal battles, broken kingdoms, and silent suffering, the story shows us that wars are not won by swords alone, but by mindset, leadership, and the willingness to adapt to a shifting world. England does not fall because its people lack courage, it falls because its values, once noble, become rigid walls that trap it in the past. The world is unforgiving to those who stand still. While the Vikings move forward with ruthless evolution, England stands firm in tradition, honor, and hesitation, and that contrast seals its fate. Every battlefield loss, every political mistake, and every moment of delay becomes a reminder that survival demands transformation, even when it hurts. More importantly, the fall of England sets the stage for the deeper message of Vinland Saga, that true strength is not domination, but understanding the cycle of violence and breaking free from it. From kings to warriors to innocent civilians, everyone pays the price of endless conflict, and the anime challenges us to question whether conquest is ever truly victory. England's defeat becomes a mirror, forcing us to reflect on how societies, like individuals, can collapse when they refuse to evolve emotionally, morally, and strategically. And so, as England fades beneath the shadow of Viking ships, Vinland Saga leaves us with a powerful truth: history does not remember who was right, only who was ready to change.